Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel, variously titled Pension Fund Capitalism, Land Grabbing, and Deforestation, or TIAA Land Grabs and Deforestation in Brazil. I'll explain that shortly. We're hosting from Johns Hopkins University. We'd like to note that Johns Hopkins is one of TIAA's largest customers, and we also want to express our solidarity with the Johns Hopkins campus over the threats and actions taken by the Trump administration against academic freedom, cutting research funding, and deporting and threatening international students. Today's discussion will focus on how two intersecting sets of powerful actors come together in a specific geography to drive systemic crises of economic injustice, climate emergency, and dispossession of people from their lands and livelihoods. On the one hand, you have agribusiness, not farming, but agribusiness, a deliberately constructed system of financialized control over food systems, which is a leading cause of global deforestation, climate destabilization, and all the ecological crises we're facing today. Hand in glove with agribusiness, there's a segment of the financial sector that we rarely think about as driving such problems, because we'd like to think of them as the companies that provide for our retirements. That is, if we're lucky enough to have retirement savings. Here we're referring to pension funds, and particularly to TIAA, a trillion-dollar asset manager which has pioneered a model of land acquisition that has made it one of the largest institutional landowners in the world. Now, this event was intended to celebrate the release of a report illuminating TIAA's role in Western Bahia, Brazil, where our researchers have looked at the company's practices as they relate to the local ecology and local community rights over land. However, 2 weeks after we shared our research report with TIAA, they sent an email this past Friday, one work day before the planned release, which was supposed to be today at 9 a.m., saying that they will take, quote, appropriate action to protect their reputation if we publish the report. This certainly reads like the threat of a lawsuit. They claim that the report has, quote, factual errors and misleading statements, but we are confident of our facts and research. We're not censoring ourselves. We are not complying in advance, but we are delaying publication to give time to add additional context to our data and to satisfy the concerns of the attorneys, which also explains the name changes for this event. Again, I'll confirm that we're confident in our analyses and we're confident in our research. We're building a movement to expose and address land grabbing and the destructive nature of industrial agribusiness, and to stand up for climate justice, economic justice, and racial justice. The overall pattern of destruction is indelibly clear. For now, on with the discussion. You'll hear from Maria Luisa Mendonça and Fabio Pita, both from the Brazilian Network for Social Justice and Human Rights. A speaker from Bahia, Brazil, representing affected communities, whose name is being withheld for security purposes, and also from Doug Hertzler with ActionAid USA and Abigail Reese representing TIAA Divest. We've also allowed time for moderated discussion at the end, where we'll take questions from the Q&A and direct them to each of our panelists. So let's turn our attention to Maria Luisa Mendonça of the Brazilian Network for Social Justice and Human Rights.
Thank you very much. Muito obrigada a todos e todas. Thank you so much for everyone who is participating today. We can start with the next slide, please. The Network for Social Justice and Human Rights started to do research about this process of financial speculation on farmland after the global economic crisis in 2008 and the collapse of the housing market in the United States. At that time, we found out that there was this new trend of financial corporations targeting farmland around the world, and Brazil is one of the main targets. I tried to avoid using the word investment to talk about this process because investment usually has a positive meaning. So we are using this idea that these corporations target farmland around the world. And the way in which we found out about the role of TIAA was because we were looking at a partnership between a company called Cosan, which is the largest sugarcane corporation in Brazil, agribusiness corporation, and Shell, the oil company, the Dutch oil company Shell. And that partnership meant that agribusiness and oil corporations were controlling ethanol production, which was sold as green energy. So we were challenging this idea and looking at the so-called false solutions for climate change. And then we found out that Cosan had created this new subsidiary called Radar or Radar in English. And that was a new type of corporation, was a type of rural real estate corporation. And then we found out that the main source of funding for Radar was TIAA, this US-based pension fund that also receives and manages funds from pension funds in Europe and in Canada. So even before we started to do work with local communities on the ground, we knew two things. We knew that when a large corporation like TIAA sets up funds, global funds to buy farmland around the world, that process already puts peasant communities, indigenous communities, and small farmers at risk of displacement. And second is that although the main goal of these financial corporations is control over land, in order to justify that, they promote monocropping plantations of agricultural commodities, which is very different than producing food. So, and we know that any type of extensive monocropping plantation has huge environmental impacts and is a main cause of climate change. Next slide, please. So one of the main regions that is being targeted by this process is the Brazilian Cerrado, which is the most biodiverse savanna in the world. And there is also a neo-colonial type of discourse, as if in Brazil there is all these huge pieces of just empty land. But the only way that agribusiness plantations can expand is by either destroying native forests or replacing and displacing local communities and local food production to expand monocropping plantations. So that process has very serious impact for rural communities, and we're going to hear more about that later. So that also creates a serious environmental problem of pollution of water sources. It destroys the soil and local food production. It creates violence and destroys biodiversity, which also creates a risk for TIAA clients, because once the soil is destroyed, the land is destroyed, that of course decreases the productivity level. So there is a risk in that type of business. Next slide, please. So what we are doing now is building this movement against land grabbing, starting with community organizing. The communities now, because of all the research we have been doing for several years, the communities know what is happening. So they have tools now to organize and build strategies to advance collective land rights. We produce lots of information, so you can look at information in English and in Portuguese on our website. And we're also building this international coalition because having international visibility when there is, for example, a case of displacement, death threats, or environmental destruction, the local communities can then call out, and we put out action alerts, for example, and that creates a level of protection for local communities on the ground. So we have been organizing petitions, faculty resolutions, student groups. So there is a lot of organizing happening, and you can look for more information about that on the website of the Stop Land Grab Coalition. That's the next slide. So this is a collective coalition that we have been building, and we're inviting everyone to be part of this process. And so we are going to, you can look for more information, and we look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria Luisa. And our next speaker will be Fabio Pita, also from the Network for Social Justice. And Fabio will be discussing the financialization of farmland and commodities production in relation with the need for expansion, deforestation, illegal land grabbing, and impacts over communities.
Thanks, Bill. Good afternoon, everybody. So I want to talk to you about how financialization of agriculture through agribusiness, for it to happen and to accumulate, needs structurally to deforest and to illegally grab land. And the main target for it is the Cerrado in Brazil, mainly for soy production. And I also want to address the impacts of such a process. Next slide, please. So I will not talk about numbers, only for me to be able to show you a little bit how it works. We are talking here about commodity prices. They are defined in financial markets internationally. And we can see that such prices, with the yellow line here, they achieve a peak just after pandemics. Those prices are speculative prices. Investors, they bet with prices, and such prices, they drive the expansion of commodity productions, such as soybean, the main commodity produced in the Cerrado area, and in the Mato Piba area, region in Brazil, with the states of Maranhão, Tocantins, Piauí, and Bahia, a focus for commodity production and speculation with farmland in Brazil. How does it work? How it works? Soy producers, they issue debts over those high prices. Those prices were very high in 2022, 2023, sorry. And they have to pay those debts in the future. The debts are so high that the producers, they can't pay them with the size of their production in the moment that they issue the debts. They need to expand. Nowadays, soybean production is very much mechanized. They employ very few workers, but even if they do that, the need for expansion have to go to the destruction of nature. They have to deforest to expand, to be able to try to pay their debts in the future, or better, to roll over those debts, to issue new debts with new promise to pay bigger debts in the future. So they always need to expand their production. Mechanization is not enough for them. So next slide, please. So as we can see here, a Brazilian map, and The brown area is the Cerrado in Brazil, and we can see for the last 50 years how soy production took Brazil and Brazilian area. And it happens as with deforestation, with the deforestation of the Cerrado, with the destruction of nature. They need to expand the frontier of soy production. So next slide, please. You can see that the same thing happens when we talk about deforestation. Yeah? The red area here is deforestation in the northeast of Brazil, the so-called Mato Piba region, as I said before. And it's the main target for new expansion, for the expansion of the frontier, the deforestation of the Cerrado, and the creation of new farms for soy production, but also, of course, for speculation with farmland, how it works, that speculation. So the enterprises, they buy new land with the Cerrado, they deforest, they wait for the price of the land to increase, to go up, and then they sell it for soy production. So many enterprises, as Maria Luisa said before, were created to do so, to speculate only with farmland. And we see many of those enterprises right now in the Mato Piba region. Deforestation is terrible, it's devastating. So I will talk about a little bit now how it works regarding the relationship with the deforestation of the Cerrado, soybean production, and the communities that still live in the region. So next slide, please. That's how it looks like in the Cerrado of the northeast of Brazil. We have high flat plateaus, as you can see here. That's where the soybean enters, because it's possible for them to use machines and also to use artificial irrigation, using all the water of the region. That's where the springs are, and the rivers, they flow, they run to the lowlands where the communities live. And so how a community, a peasant, indigenous, or Afro-descendant community lives in that region. They inhabit the lowlands. That's where they produce their food, but they use the high flat plateaus to collect medicine, to hunt, to collect fruits, to herd their cattle. So the expansion of soy production, finalized soy production with agribusiness, they displace, they dispossess, they evict those communities of their areas, usually because it's cheaper, illegally grabbing the land that's being used by those communities for decades or also more than 100 years. So those lands should be, they are their tenures, and the state, the constitution, should protect those lands for them, but it doesn't happen. Actually, agribusiness is supported by governments, and the consequences are terrible and devastating. So please, next slide. This is a huge chain. That's how they deforest the Cerrado. They have 2 tractors and 1 huge big chain, and they destroy all the trees. After that, they burn the trees. So they create a new farm out of the Cerrado. Next slide, please. This is an area deforested. We've been following this pattern and this situation for many years. So it was some years ago. That's after the chain was used. Next one. Then comes fire to burn what's left. Next one, please. And yeah, here the high flat plateau. To the right, you can see the Cerrado, the native Cerrado, and to the left, we can see a soybean production area. So it's very clear, and with a road between them. It's very clear. The areas are huge. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of hectares, sometimes millions of hectares. You know? So we have the destruction of the nature. We have the rivers that they are dying. We have dried up rivers. I think it's the next slide, so we can go for it. Yeah, this is a dried up river. This is from our last field trip. Next one. And only for us to see how communities looks like. Yeah. So they have to leave their land. Yeah? They are dispossessed. They have to leave. They don't find work outside of their land, their tenures. So the consequences are terrible for the environment and socially speaking for the communities. The next one, the last one. Thanks. That's it. So we have here with us a representative of a community in West Bahia, a community which is impacted by agribusiness expansion in such a Cerrado area. He's going to tell us a little bit how are the impacts there. Então, a gente
So we
tem
will
aqui com a gente
have
representante
an
de uma
interpretive and a
comunidade
representative in the
de
community
camponeses do
of,
oeste da
of,
Bahia. E ele
of
vai
people
contar para
in
a
the
gente
west of
como é a
Bahia,
vida lá
and
na
he's
cidade e os
going to be
impactos, né, da
present with other
expansão do
members of
agronegócio
the
sobre a comunidade dele.
community in Bahia, and he's going
He's
to be
the
talking about
representative
impact.
of the Association of Little River Happiness. It's the name of his community. Então, ele é representante da Associação de
He is
Moradores da
representative of the
Vereda da
Association
Felicidade.
of Communities
Então,
from
por
Pereira da
favor,
Felicidade. So
meu amigo da
please,
comunidade,
my
pode
friend
contar
from the
pouquinho para a
community,
gente dos
please tell us a
impactos
little bit about
do
the impacts
agronegócio aí na
of
região de vocês e
agribusiness
na
in your
comunidade de
region,
vocês. É um
and in your
prazer
community.
ter vocês aqui.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Boa tarde.
Good
Meu nome é
afternoon.
Dernevo,
I
oeste da
am
Bahia,
here from
cidade
the
de
west of
Correntina,
Bahia, from the city of
da
Correntina,
comunidade de
of the
Silvânia,
community of
e
Savânia.
represento a
I
Associação
am
Pereira da
representing the
Felicidade.
Association Pereira da Felicidade.
Os impactos que a
And
gente
the
vem sofrendo, o
impacts that we have
principal,
been
tirou o
suffering
nosso direito de ir
took
e
away
vir.
our right to
Nós
come and
estamos
go. We are
perdendo as nossas tradições,
losing
perdendo as
our
nossas
traditions,
culturas,
our
que é de
culture,
levar os nossos
which
animais
is
para
to take
peixe.
our
Já não temos
animals
mais,
to the river.
já não
We can
sentimos
no
mais
longer do
seguro
this.
levar nossos
We don't
animais,
have the
porque
safety to do this
a área está cheia de
because the
garimpeiros, cheia
area
de
is full
pistoleiros,
of land grabbers and people that are armed,
fortemente armados. E aí,
heavily
como é que
armed.
pai de
And
família
so how is a
fica
father
diante de
of
uma
a family
situação dessa?
going to do and
A
face this
ferramenta que a gente usa é
situation?
facão, uma foice,
What
para
we
fazer as
have in our hands
limpezas,
is a big
e
knife
eles
that
com
we use to
armas
clear the
pesadas,
land,
fortemente
and they
armados,
are
não respeitam
using heavy
ninguém,
guns and
humilham
don't
nós dentro
respect
da nossa
anybody.
área.
They humiliate us,
E,
and
e essa
and this
são os
and
impactos que nós
these are the impacts
estamos
that we
sofrendo,
are suffering.
além dos nossos
In
animais
addition
que
to our
que
animals
somem dentro da
that
área,
disappear
sem
in
nenhuma
these areas
explicação,
without
não
any
deixa nenhuma
explanation.
pista e
There's
são
no
inúmeros animais.
trace of,
A
of
última
where all
vez
these numbers of
assumido
animals are going.
desapareceram
The last
40
time,
animais sem nenhuma
40 animals
explicação.
disappeared without any explanation.
Essas
And
grilagens são
these land
aqui
grabbings
para
are
nós é
done,
reconhecida como grilagem verde.
we call them as
Depois eles
green
arrumam uma
land
maneira de
grabbing
desmatar,
because they find a
e
way
esses
of clearing the
desmatamentos
land,
secam nossas
and
nascentes,
these deforestation
derruba toda
clears
uma vegetação que
dries up our
muito
water
delas
and dries up the
são
vegetation.
árvores medicinais que servem para
And
a
these are
cura do nosso
medicinal
povo.
plants that are important
As
for curing
plantas,
our people. The
os
plants
frutos
are,
que nós
um,
extraímos para
these are
tirar
the plants where
renda
we
para
extract our finances and the money no longer pass this land on, and we are facing this situation. We cannot use a territory that was left by our people. We say that it's secular, but it's many more years that we've been trying to use this land. We are descendants of indigenous people and Black people. So we have been on this land since the beginning. So since there's ever been people here in the west of Bahia, we are here and we've been using this land. And suddenly there are people coming from outside and land grabbing, and they're dispossessing us, dispossessing our traditional communities from this land. And we usually take our animals twice a year. It's a refuge that we do in our land, and we take them to another area to do pasture grazing. And now we can no longer do this because, in addition to all the criminality, they with all these guns, they stop us from entering the land. So this activity of ours is absolutely impossible to take place. And this activity is where we produce green meat, which is organic cow meat. It is created and raised in nature. It is a huge area, and we create very few animals because we don't have deforestation. We don't have mechanization. We are not destroying these lands. They are the ones who are doing this. Agro-business with land grabbing and their guns is what's taking away this vegetation, deforesting and destroying the vegetation, and they are not defending the land. In addition to a lot of toxic insecticides that they are throwing onto the land. They're throwing this onto this land and polluting our waters and polluting our people as a consequences of this, who are impacted by this pollution. Our families, they are dying of cancer. They're suffering from cancer. Here in Correntina, it's absurd, the increase in cancer, and this is because of agribusiness that has invaded our land through land grabbing. Before, this wasn't something that happened. We've never seen water who doesn't have a member in the family who has cancer. This is so absurd. We are so surprised. And this is an action of agribusiness in our land. And in our land, where we are, Vida da Felicidade, they are saying that no, it's not them, that it's another farm, Farm Colorado. They're calling it Farm Colorado. But this is part of a group that has investments on top of our lands, which is in this farmland. So we think that this Colorado is a huge company that land grabbed and is now making money and profit off of our land. They're also doing green land grabbing, which is to keep some of the land green and gain benefits from forested areas. And so they're kicking us out, they're dispossessing us, they're telling us that they bought this land and that they don't recognize any of the communities that have been there. But we have been there for centuries, and they have been there for just a few years, and they simply put it on the media that no, that we have never been there, that we don't exist. And then what are we going to do? How are we going to live? It's been a century since we've been there. And then suddenly we're dispossessed from our land. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, meu amigo.
Thank you very much. And we will continue the next presentation. Your report is really moving and helps us illustrate effectively what is happening in your lives and how this is impacting your lives.
That was very powerful. Thank you. Our next speaker is Doug Hertzler. Doug is a TIAA participant and also works for an organization called ActionAid. And Doug will describe some of the problems with row cropping and timberland of the sort that we've seen in the last discussion.
Hello, my name is Doug Hertzler, and I'm a participant in the TIAA retirement plan. Through my employer, ActionAid USA, which is an NGO working on climate and food justice internationally. ActionAid USA originally put our money in TIAA because we believed it was more sustainable and responsible than other retirement fund managers. But since then, we discovered that TIAA is basically the same as other retirement fund managers like Vanguard and Fidelity, just with more dedication to greenwashing and what you might call social washing. We have been very unhappy about this and have been working for some time to get TIAA to change. TIAA manages over $1 trillion and has 12,000 education and nonprofit clients and 4.7 million employee participants like me and many of you who are employed by universities. TIAA is distinct from other retirement managers in that it is one of the world's largest buyers of rural land. Can you please advance the slide? Globally, TIAA has gained control of 3 million acres of land worth about $14 billion. Brazil is the country where they own the most land, over 1 million acres. They have their second largest and most valuable holdings in the United States, where they own 800,000 acres or more land than the entire state of Rhode Island. TIAA owns land using shell companies, which means that local communities often don't realize who is taking control of land around them. And in Brazil, it allows them to get around law, which restricts international ownership of rural land. This slide is a slightly out-of-date illustration of the shell companies that TIAA uses to acquire land in the 4 northeastern Brazilian states where the most deforestation is occurring, known as Mato Piba. And the way TIAA operates is that they partner with large farm operators. They operate both in Brazil and the United States this way, large agricultural, I should say agribusiness operators. And they buy a portion of land from them and then lease it back to them, giving them the capital to expand their holdings larger. So, in some cases, they buy land that has already been deforested, but then their capital allows the operator to deforest more land. TIAA's funds and their many shell companies are managed by the TIAA subsidiary Nuveen. And not long ago, TIAA and Nuveen created Nuveen Natural Capital, which brings together both their timber plantation and their agricultural plantation holdings. Please advance the slide. These are the states in the US where TIAA has accumulated land. ActionAid USA visited TIAA land holdings in 5 different states. Everywhere we went, it seemed to us that TIAA's management practices were almost indistinguishable from bad conventional agricultural practice on other agro-industrial plantations. On their timberland, the Coastal Range Association in Oregon has done a lot of research. They say that companies like TIAA maximize financial returns by clear-cutting patches in a fast rotation, which results in lower forest carbon sequestration. Wall Street management of timberland does not create as many good jobs as would be created by community managed forestry. The Coastal Range Association has a very good paper on this. In the Northeast US, TIAA owns timberland with natural gas wells. They do not currently own the mineral rights in at least the ones we looked at, but they have not made their long-term intentions clear. In New York State, they have invested in a big natural gas plant. In California, TIAA drilled extremely deep wells in areas affected by drought. literally draining water from the more shallow wells of farm worker communities. Bloomberg has done an excellent investigative piece on this. Bloomberg alleges that TIAA is contributing to land sinking that damages roads and irrigation canals. We believe that TIAA's profits from land are gained by creating environmental and climate debt and also public financial debt. Because TIAA's plantation operators are able to get enormous public subsidies for the kind of agriculture they do. We believe that TIAA contributes to growth in farm size, the extraction of profits from poor rural areas to the financial industry in cities like New York and Chicago, and the decline of local businesses and communities. Next slide. In recent years, TIAA has made huge acquisitions in the Mississippi Delta in areas where Black farmers and communities had been previously dispossessed by discrimination, outright violence, and threats. TIAA's purchases help local white elites cash in on the history of racial injustice, and these local elites have used TIAA's capital to expand their plantations. In our view, TIAA and its clients are now the ones profiting from this history of racial violence. 98% of Black farmers in the US were dispossessed of 12 million acres since Reconstruction, but a substantial amount of that dispossession has occurred since the Civil Rights Movement. TIAA has acquired around 180,000 acres in the Mississippi Delta. That's over 4 times the size of the District of Columbia. Next slide, last slide. I will leave it to Abigail to talk a bit more about the Mississippi Delta, but it's amazing that quite a few Black churches and cemeteries are next to TIAA land where Black communities have been affected. These photos are taken in 2 separate locations where a Black church and a Black cemetery, a historic Black cemetery that's still in use, is completely surrounded by TIAA land. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Our next speaker is Abigail Reese, a good friend of mine. Abigail is a TIAA Divest organizer, and she'll describe what she observed on TIAA's land in the United States. And she'll also go on to describe how we can take action to change TIAA's behavior. Abigail.
As Bill said, my name is Abigail, and I'm an organizer with TIAA Divest. Next slide, please. So TIAA Divest works to get TIAA to divest $78 billion from fossil fuels and to stop financing the climate crisis. We believe that you cannot address the climate crisis by ignoring the interconnectedness of our struggles. After years of our collective pressure, TIAA and Nuveen is finally offering some actual fossil-free funds. In the past, their so-called ESG, sustainable, and social choice funds have been packed with fossil fuels, and especially fracked gas. Starting in 2024, Nuveen has cut way down on fossil fuels in 2 of their funds. This shows that TIAA is kind of responsive to climate accountability as long as pressure keeps increasing. But TIAA is still bankrolling the climate crisis through financing the destruction that we've heard today in Brazil, and also projects like the Line 3 pipeline, Adani, and they're also the world's 4th largest coal bondholder. TIAA Divest urges TIAA to meet with the communities they have destroyed in the name of responsible investing, and we believe that agribusiness is an exploitative and damaging business, and that Nuveen and TIAA should invest in the communities that they are extracting resources from. On the next slide, you'll see that TIAA kind of claims to have the same beliefs. TIAA and Nuveen claim to invest in the communities they are poisoning, exploiting, and harming. Pictured are actual language from TIAA reports, and their rhetoric works. They claim that people are an important pillar of Nuveen and that they make sure to provide them with food, and they support local communities in which they work in, as well as providing transparency to the stakeholders. But today you heard that many don't even know that TIAA is the landowner, and you also heard of the effects on the local community. Now, they also go on to explain a little bit more about what they do within communities that they have agribusiness in, and they say that they add value to these communities by focusing on educational, environmental, and social engagement. So basically, TIAA makes their money by making sure that people believe that they are a responsible company. Their financial success depends on maintaining the belief that they are acting in the best interest of people in the planet. even when their actual operations or corporate behavior shows a completely different story. Their reports claim so many things that aren't true, and they themselves acknowledge that investing in things like land grabs and climate destruction are not the things that their clients, which are professors and students, would want. On the next slide, you'll see some more of the reality of TIAA's practices. I witnessed something awful. I witnessed a community that has been disenfranchised and exploited. This huge smoke cloud is TIAA land in Arkansas. Burning crop residue releases large amounts of greenhouse gases, fine particulate matter, and toxic pollutants into the air, contributing to the climate change and severe air pollution. It destroys beneficial soil organisms, reduces soil fertility, and increases the risk of respiratory and cardiovascular disease in nearby populations. Burning trash is extremely harmful to both the environment and human health. And pictured, you will see trash piles that are burnt on TIAA land. But burning the plastic containers, especially those with herbicide residue, creates an even more dangerous compounds. It contaminates air, soil, and water, harms wildlife, and is illegal in many places because of these severe risks. Even more heartbreaking was the reality of the surrounding community, a place deeply exploited and neglected. Residents continue to tell me, if you live here, you die early. This shines light on the fact that TIAA has awareness of the true costs of their practices. They say that TIAA had knowledge of these practices up to 2010. Through leaked documents obtained from a data breach, it shows that TIAA was aware that some of the land it purchased was bought from people publicly accused of stealing it. Next slide, please. Please click the button. So TIAA publicly claims that climate risk is an investment risk. They say that they avoid unnecessary emissions and protect the health of surrounding ecosystems. This isn't just hypocrisy, it's the human cost of performative sustainability. These extractive and damaging implications can be found on TIAA land across the globe. I've witnessed them with my own eyes. If it was not for important groups like the Brazilian Network for Social Justice, many would never know the true costs of TIAA's practices. OCCRP combined the details in the leak with legal records and dozens of interviews to show that TIAA had purchased farms from accused land grabbers. These plantations are not supporting the community, are not protecting the environment. There aren't farms with foods that are feeding the world. TIAA's agribusiness represents a risk of displacement for rural communities and contributes to environmental destruction. On the next slide, you'll see that there are some ways that we can take action to stand in support with rural communities and hold TIAA and Nuveen accountable for their impact in the Brazilian Cerrado. If you are a person who is a TIAA client, we will have specific actions for you, but we're going to start with actions that everybody can take today. The first step is that you can demand TIAA go to Bahia and begin a constructive dialogue with impacted communities. If you scan the QR code, if you're in the room with me today, or if you visit the short U link that is there, and I believe that the link will be sent in the chat right now to everybody on the webinar, you will see that there is a sign on for a petition that you can add your name to demand that TIAA go to Bahia and begin conversations with the communities that they are destroying. If you are a TIAA client, this one's just for you. You can schedule a meeting with your TIAA representative to urge that TIAA meet with rural communities and stop using your money to fund destructive agribusiness. TIAA offers specific links to be able to schedule a meeting. Provided is the public link that anybody can use, but places like Johns Hopkins University actually have custom links to be able to schedule a meeting with TIAA individuals. And finally, if you are not a TIAA client, you can still name the destroyer. If you visit @TIAA on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and TikTok, you can leave a comment on many of the posts that they make to claim to be investing in communities, supporting BIPOC communities, and protecting our climate with their investments. And as Maisa said, I shouldn't be using the word investments. What TIAA is doing is destructive. And finally, if you're a writer, you can sign up to write an op-ed or a letter to the editor when the report is released. If this is something that's interested to you, you can email me and I will invite you to a Zoom where a bunch of people are going to get together and workshop different op-eds and LTE ideas. I hope that you all take the time to take action today, and you will have all of these links in your email following the webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abigail. I'd like to point out that we have 110 participants on the call right now, which is absolutely incredible, and I want to thank you all for joining. We have six open questions in the Q&A, and I welcome everybody to add more if you'd like. And what I will do is take the questions, paste them into the chat among the host and panelists, and read them out loud. And if anyone would like to answer them on the panel, please raise your hand, and you'll have the floor. So the first question is from Kate, and Kate asks, if I divest from TIAA, how can I know what to invest in that what will not diminish my retirement savings? And I'll just add parenthetically for myself, and also won't be as bad or worse than TIAA. So would anybody else like to answer that question?
I will try to answer that. I think that trying to divest from TA is a good way to approach it. We have chosen so far, although I think we may change our mind soon, but we have chosen so far to just use our place as TIA participants to keep pressuring them rather than divesting. I will say that there are some small companies that provide smaller companies, I should say, that are asset managers that are providing retirement accounts that are free of fossil fuels, and there are some that they're also getting out of agribusiness. I don't want to make a public recommendation for one company or another, but there are companies that exist, and I think that the amount of investment they're able to handle is growing. So you can talk to your university about looking for some of those possibilities.
Maria Luisa would like to also comment.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we know that it is difficult to find options to divest completely from TAA. So what we are asking in our coalition is for people to pressure TAA to divest from farmland, not to speculate with farmland just to get out of agribusiness and farmland. So a large financial corporation as TIAA doesn't have any role in that. And it's important to understand that when we talk about the impact on local communities, we are not just talking about communities in Brazil, far away from us, but the Brazilian Cerrado has a key role in, for example, rain cycles for the whole hemisphere. It's the region where most of the Brazilian rivers have their river springs, so it's a very important source of water. The roots of the vegetation in the Cerrado are very deep, go on and on and on for many kilometers, so it's a very important source of groundwater for the whole hemisphere. So it's very important to understand that, and to tell TIAA, if you're a client, that this will have huge impacts, not just for local communities that are in the front line of this struggle, and we need to be in solidarity with them because they are the ones protecting the land and protecting real food production for local markets, but that is also very a large impact for all of us. And then I also saw that is a question about the Brazilian government. The same thing goes for Brazilians who are in the call, Brazilian organizations, to pressure also the Brazilian government to stop subsidizing agribusiness and to prioritize local food production and healthy ecological agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Luisa. Our next question comes from John, and the question is, at your suggestion, I've sent email to the new trustee, forgot his name. I think you might have been talking about Michael Fanning, who just joined the Board of Trustees. I don't think I got a response. I'm pretty sure you didn't get a response. Do you have any feedback that this kind of pressure has any effect? And I know that Abigail was interested in answering that one, so I'll hand it off to you, Abigail.
We've actually received direct feedback on what happens when we decide to email TIA leadership and hold them accountable. It's very disruptive to their day, right? Their inbox is important. So they're seeing these emails, and this disruption is in nowhere near to the scale of the disruption of what they're doing in places like Brazil. And they're definitely more aware when more people send these emails. In fact, we work closely with a couple of different groups at Cornell, where there is a Board of Governor member, Maureen O'Hara, and we've targeted her a few different times with direct action and email action. And one of the things that she has verbally stated she's most frustrated with is receiving emails. So contacting TIA is effective, not just in disrupting their day-to-day business, but in making sure that your voice as a client is heard.
That good answer. Thank you. So the next question, let's see, comes from, did I actually click answered? Yes, I did. Okay, so the next one is from Kevin. And Kevin says, Obrigado, many thanks, excellent presentations. I send fulsome solidarity from Ottawa, Canada, Algonquin, Anishinaabe territory. I work on pension fund capitalism at Carleton University. My question is to Bill. Thank you. How is TIA Divest's project going? The story of ecological destruction is not only horrifying for the people of this region of Brazil, but also accelerates climate change and is therefore a threat to all of us, including TIA members and their futures. I'll be honest. Our campaign right now is facing a tough time because the people that we are supporting and who support us are primarily academics and students and staff at universities. And as we know, all of you who are educators and students and staff at universities are also facing a very hard time. Based on our internal discussions at TIAA, our intention is to increase our level of intercooperation and solidarity with other movements so that we can all support one another. I believe that through ensuring that we all maintain a strong level of solidarity, we can actually make change and avoid the destructive divide and conquer approach that is the strategy of our oppressors. Okay.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I just wanted to respond briefly to the last question as well as a comment on this one. And we'd be remiss if we didn't point out that TIA has two boards that manage it. There's a board of governors and a board of trustees. And on the board of governors is supposed to be, well, the board of governors is 6 or 7 people, including the CEO. And the president of Johns Hopkins University, Ron Daniels, is one of those governors. And also here in Baltimore, the president of Morgan State University, David K. Wilson, is also one of the governors. So now is a time of crisis in our university communities. As we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we are really in solidarity with Johns Hopkins and the threats being faced here. But we will keep working, and there will be opportunities to reach out through TIA Divest or the Stop Land Grabs campaign. And we will certainly deliver this report to the president of Johns Hopkins. We hope it'll be out in a couple of weeks, certainly within 4 weeks, and we will be making sure they see that. I did have a comment on the one before, on the other one too. Just to say that Canadians, are involved in this too, believe it or not. Not necessarily all Canadians, but if you have a public pension fund from the province of Quebec or from British Columbia, they have invested money in TIA's land funds. TIA's land funds are made up, a big chunk of it from TIA's general account, which is their annuity product. And also, then they bring in money from other investors, and many public pension funds have chipped in, including some in Canada. I'm sorry, go ahead now.
Okay. There'll be another question for you, Doug, coming up. So the next one is directed to Fabio. Lais asks, could you please talk more about the aspect of debt in agribusiness? Does this refer to individual producer debt or to big companies? How can a seemingly prosperous sector like soybean exports struggle with constant debt?
Okay, a moment.
Yeah, if you wanted me to answer that, Bill, when we or
Well,
Fabio.
actually, it was Doug. Hold on, it was directed to Fabio, but you can answer afterwards.
Oh, go ahead, Fabio, please.
Okay, thanks, Doug. So, of course, okay, financialization of agribusiness plays a big role here for us to understand how production and debts are totally entangled nowadays. It refers to individual producers, but also to huge companies. It's throughout the whole soybean production or value chain. Mainly since 2002 and onwards, commodities prices are defined by derivative markets, future markets. They are bets over commodities prices. It's difficult to explain in very few minutes how those future markets, they define the present, how those future markets and future prices, how they define the present prices for commodities in general. When we say commodities, we are talking about not only agribusiness production, agriculture, but also oil and iron and other commodities too. And so we are not talking only about soybean production, but also sugarcane in Brazil and sugar and timber and pulp and so on, for example. Yeah, but for me to be brief, I would say that those speculative prices, those bets over commodities derivatives, they started to get and to create higher and higher prices since 2002 until 2008. Then after the international financial crisis of 2008 until 2011, the prices, they became very, very high. And it was a sort of bubble, a sort of commodities bubble. And so enterprises, they use those prices. So producers, individuals or huge companies, trading companies too, all of them, they use those prices as collateral for their debts. So everybody is trying to seize that moment and to increase their production. That's the point. If you don't do that, you lose the race. So everybody has to do that. And so enterprises, they promise to, so they issue a very huge debt, and that happened again after pandemic. That happened again after 2022. And we are having many enterprises in trouble here in Brazil right now because of that. Again, because after 2011 and the Eurozone, that crisis in 2012, commodity prices decreased a lot, so the bubble burst. And so it decreased a lot, and many enterprises went into trouble or bankruptcy. And after 2022, it happened again. The prices were so high, so enterprises, the producers, the trading companies, they issued that over those prices, promising to pay it in the future. So they have to
Thank you very much, Fabio. The next question comes from an anonymous attendee, and I think I'll answer this one. Do we know the funds in which TIAA holds its Brazilian land assets? Do plan participants direct their retirement savings specifically into those funds? For example, when choosing a 401k or 403b from a plan's menu of fund offerings. So Doug mentioned that Nuveen, which is TIAA's investment subsidiary, we haven't mentioned them much, but Nuveen is a big component of TIAA. Offers many different funds that you can invest in via your retirement plan. And probably the best solution that I can recommend in terms of figuring out which ones are safe and which ones have these sorts of risks is to go to a website called Fossil Free Funds. And at that site, there's also a section called Deforestation Free Funds. And you can enter the various choices that you have and see them graded and ranked. And we rely on that quite heavily. Again, Fossil Free Funds is that site. And as Doug mentioned earlier, if you have a TIAA annuity, TIAA has really complete control over how to spend and where to place those funds. And a lot of that is funding this sort of activity. So annuities are definitely something to watch out for. The next question from maybe another anonymous attendee is, what kinds of pressure can you put on your own university? What alternatives are available? Would anyone like to answer that one?
I'll answer like what the pressure is that you can put. Direct action's always great. So if you're ever interested in doing something like that, my email's been provided. You can bring awareness through faculty resolutions, through meeting with the individuals that are connected to TIAA at your institution, and from really just bringing awareness that there's no retirement on a dead planet. Because like I said, in my work, I've been with TIAA Divest for about 2 years now. The number one thing I hear is, I had no idea TIAA was in fossil fuels. I had no idea that TIAA had plantations. So bring out the awareness is great. And then finally, if you would like to kind of get like a TIAA Divest movement started on your campus, we do have presence at different campuses. We've done actions with University of Minnesota, with Cornell, and now we're at Johns Hopkins. So if there's something that you would like to do, again, email us and reach out. And I believe I'm going to pass it to Maisa, who's going to finish up for me.
Now, just one quick observation is that it's important to have these individual actions, but if people are part of, for example, a faculty senate or a student group or alumni group, I think that also pressuring your institution as a group is very effective. So in addition to the individual clients' pressure, that is also this possibility of organizing faculty, students, and staff. And TIAA Divest has a lot of resources for that. And we also have some petitions on the Stop Land Grabs Coalition website. So there's a lot of language that other groups have developed already that could be very helpful. Thanks.
So the next question from Kathleen is there any concern that if TIAA divests from these lands, that some less responsive company might step in with more destructive practices? Who would like to answer Kathleen's question? Fabio.
Yes, I can do that. So, yeah, the risk is huge. Actually, that happened with Harvard Endowment Fund in Brazil. They were invested in many farms in the same region, in the Mato Piba region. And we made some seminars 2023, 2024 at Harvard, launching a report about also their investments in Brazil in the same region. And their biggest company called Insolo, they had very similar practices. We are trying to show to you today. And after our pressure, they claimed that they sold their farms from this company called Insolo. And if we don't know if it's true, we were not able to prove that. We are not sure, but even if they really did that, yeah, a part of it they sold. That we don't know if they keep some part of the company. But the main guy that bought it, it's a right-wing entrepreneur from Brazil, Bolsonaro supporter. He became, I think, the fourth or the fifth biggest soy producer in Brazil right now. And his company practices are same or even worse than when we had Harvard doing that sort of business. You know? He is promoting a huge expansion in the areas, deforesting, grabbing illegally, displacing communities, and Harvard must be held responsible of it because they profited with the business. Yeah? So they bought those farms. They sold them with profit to this guy, and they think they don't have their hands in the business anymore. And Radar claims to do the same nowadays. Yeah, they claim they are selling some farms, so they don't have anything to do with the business anymore. And of course they have. Yeah? They were part of all the illegalities, and they profited with it. That's the point. So the problem keeps going on. Yeah.
Thanks, Fabio. Maria, Luisa?
Yeah, just one quick thing. So that's why we are demanding that these corporations return the land to the local communities. When you saw the flatlands, the plateaus in the Cerrado, all of that used to be public lands. So the only way to put those lands in the market was through governmental auction that most of them never happens. So that's why we know that probably everything is land grabbing. All those, the privatization of those lands started with land grabbing, illegal land grabbing. And so what we are demanding is that TIAA Harvard had, should return land to the local communities and pay reparations for environmental and social damages.
Yeah, I wanted to concur that we're not asking TIAA just to dump the land they have. They have to transition it, to something better, to local ownership. And so it's not a simple matter of just demanding that they sell the land they have. However, we are asking that they stop buying land. I mean, because this has real effects for every bit of money they put into the land market. There's a fixed amount of land, and it increases the demand for land, increases the price of land, and it encourages other speculators to come in to get land. So, the stopping the buying of land immediately is a key demand.
Our next question, I think, is very interesting from Carolina. She asks, thanks so much for an interesting presentation. Do we know of any cases where laws and regulations have been able to prevent international funds from purchasing farmland through shell companies? And do we have any indication that TIAA might be eyeing new sources of profit in the so-called green energy sector, which has been creating a track record of violations in Brazil and elsewhere? Doug, would you like to address that one?
Yeah, I can certainly address that. I think there were two parts. Let's see. The first one was, what was the first part of the question?
Well, the first part of the question was, are there any places in which the laws of that country have been successful?
Okay, I was thinking about the answer to the second, and I was losing the place. There are laws in Brazil designed to do this, right? And our Brazilian colleagues can speak more to that. But TIAA has found, by using these shell companies, finding loopholes around them. That should be fixed. But from Brazil, but here in the United States, it's state laws that regulate this kind of thing. And for example, the state of Iowa, the reason when I showed you my map, the state of Iowa does not have any TIAA land is because they ban this kind of ownership. Wealthy people can buy large amounts of land, but corporations and investors cannot buy land in Iowa. I think Wisconsin was also the same case, although TIAA went in and bought land and tried to change the law, but failed, and then they backed out. So it can be regulated. The green, TIAA has been in this green. There's lots of things they're doing under the aim of climate solutions with land that are very concerning. They've long been, when they first started buying up land, they were in, as Maria Luisa mentioned, very much into the biofuels industry. They've dropped talking about that because pretty much everyone realizes that ethanol is not a climate solution. But that was part of their original rationale. They are intending to try to capitalize on carbon credits. There's a lot of work being done by big landowners, especially to get carbon credits for agricultural practices. But science has shown that those are not really permanent carbon sequestration. But TIAA is very involved in that. And they have several forest-based carbon credit projects. In fact, they have a conflict with communities in Colombia where they bought a large amount of forested and tree plantation land that is in conflict with Colombian communities, specifically for carbon credits. They also have carbon credit projects in Brazil, which require more research. They're kind of hiding where those are, but they've admitted that they have them.
Maria Luisa?
Yes. We have done a lot of research about the negative impacts of expanding monocropping plantations for the production of agrofuels. We call agrofuels, not biofuels. So you can find information about that on our website, on previous reports in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Also, we are working on a new report about the role of TIAA in timber production in Brazil. So hopefully we are going to have a new report together with ActionAid and Friends of the Earth in the next months. And so they expand eucalyptus plantations that have huge environmental impacts on water, on forests, and then claim carbon credits. So that's a new research that we have been working on about TIAA that we are going to release in a few months. And then in terms of the laws in Brazil, this very complex structure of subsidiaries that TIAA uses is to hide that they are the main source of funding to operate in Brazilian land markets, which, in Brazil, there is a limit of foreign ownership of land. So they try to create this set of subsidiaries to hide foreign funding for operating in farmland markets. And we have been doing legal work and research work about that as well.
Fabio, please go ahead.
Radar, just a year ago, became a Latin America enterprise. So Nuveen had included inside Radar all their timber farms in Latin America. And now Radar produces timber all around in Colombia, as Doug said, in Brazil. And also, of course, they are going to explore carbon credits with that. Yeah? This is very new. Now they are huge. They dominate huge territories. They have more than 500,000 of hectares. I don't know by heart how much it is in acres. But it's a lot of farmland. So only to add that information, we are also trying to have more information on that. If it was a Brazilian enterprise for many years, more than a decade, now they are continental.
Yeah, I'll just add, while I'm not talking specifically about TIAA or Nuveen, if you're interested, to all the audience, please do some research, look up carbon credit fraud. It is a very serious problem. It's endemic across the carbon credit markets where there are no meaningful controls. So we are very much opposed to carbon credit schemes. We will take some live questions, first from Cam, and then I'll also interleave some of the questions that are in the Q&A. So Cam, please go ahead.
Hi, I have two questions. I was not able to put them in my phone. It wouldn't enter it anymore. So anyway, the first one is Lula doing better with this stuff in Brazil than the previous president? Okay, so the second question is expanding. You said they had to keep expanding. I think Fabio said that it had to keep expanding the soy lands, so if they had to keep expanding, wouldn't the demand for soy drop off?
Okay, so the first question, Maria Luisa, would you like to discuss the question of leadership in Brazil?
Yes. Well, the power of agribusiness continues in Brazil. The agribusiness corporations continue to receive huge amounts of subsidized credit from the government. So they are a very powerful force in Brazilian politics. I think the difference now between Lula and Bolsonaro was that now there is an opening for organizations, communities to pressure the government. There is more dialogue with the federal government, but still there are lots of local forces, the local rural oligarchs, and people in Congress members that are linked to agribusiness. So that is it's a huge power struggle still. And that is this idea that agribusiness generates revenue for Brazil. But all our studies show that the product of agribusiness is actually that. I have done research, for many years, looking at the balance of trade and comparing the balance of trade of agribusiness with the amount of debt, the amount of unpaid debt of agribusiness corporations. And the amount of debt is actually much larger than what they generate in export revenues for the country. So it's not like Brazil needs to expand. But this, we are not going to deal with the climate crisis if we don't change the agricultural systems to local diversified agroecology. If we keep expanding plantations, we are going to have a decline in agricultural productivity and a huge climate catastrophe, because agribusiness is a main cause of climate change and destruction in Brazil. So they have to expand from their perspective, not because the country needs that. Agribusiness creates financial debt and environmental debt and poverty in the countryside. It doesn't generate equality, income, and any benefits for the local economies.
Maria, can I ask a question just to clarify my understanding? So in terms of the need for agribusiness conglomerates to keep expanding, is one of the reasons because the soil itself can become exhausted and the previously cleared land is no longer usable?
Yes, that's part of it, because they have the model of monocropping plantations is very destructive. They use heavy amounts of chemical inputs. They destroy the water, they destroy biodiversity. All of these natural inputs are very important to have a productive agricultural system. So once you have destroyed the land, then these companies, they start expanding to appropriate more natural resources that are very important for agriculture. But that is also the question that Fabio mentioned before. All these corporations have debt, and they access subsidized credit. And the credit amount they receive is proportional to their assets. So if they have land, if they have machinery, if they have stocks, all of that are used as collateral to access subsidized credit from the government. So actually they produce financial debt. They don't contribute to the economy. So, the expansion is part of the speculative nature of farmland markets and commodity markets.
Fabio?
Cam's second question is also very good. Yeah, it talks about the problem of crisis and overproduction. And if we see what happens in the soybean chain, production chain, the main destination of it is they used to feed animals in industrial production of meat. Yeah. Also, it goes now to some so-called biofuels, agrofuels, and ultra-processed food. So, of course, they need to expand. At the same time, they need to create a market for all those soy beings produced. That's the point. So consumption is also defined by such a process. The increase in those sort of commodities or merchandise has to do with the need of expansion. So the point is that we are dominated by such mode of production, as Maria Luisa said. So it's not only a matter of changing our habits or our consumption habits. As we are part of this whole structure, our habits are defined by this sort of production, this structure. We are all entangled with that. That's the point. So we have to change land structure. We have to change economic structure, as Maria Luisa already said before, for us to change also consumption habits. That's the point.
Thank you. Next live question will be Marco.
E agora, me escutam?
Can you hear me now?
Ai, sorry.
Sorry.
Ok, vou fazer em português.
I'm going to speak in Portuguese.
Escrevi a questão e vou
I wrote a
repeti-la.
question, but I am going to say it out loud.
Eu gostaria que o
I
Fábio
would like to know from Fábio,
desse alguns exemplos
could
de
give a few
ações
examples
violentas que
of the
acontecem
violent
contra
actions
essas
that are
comunidades
happening against these
e que
communities
têm alguma
and that
relação
have
com o
a
avanço
relationship with
da
the
TIA
advancing
nessas
of
regiões.
TIA in these areas.
E se existem as
And
ações
if there
violentas,
is
a gente
these
conhece no
violent
Brasil
acts as
como
we know them in
expulsão,
Brazil, that we know
expropriação
as
de comunidades,
dispossession and the expulsion of
pistolagem,
communities,
que seria uma ação
and
mais
this
violenta,
gun
se
forms of
ocorre essas
expulsion of people.
ações,
And if these actions are happening,
não é possível
it is not
processar
possible to
judicialmente a TIA aqui no
take
Brasil?
legal action against TIAA here in Brazil.
Então, eu vou responder em português.
So I'm going to answer in Portuguese so that I can talk to Marco.
Pode ser em inglês, Fábio, pode falar inglês.
Oh, you can speak in English if you want.
Mas daí eu dialogo com você, com as
But
comunidades.
I
Tem
really want to
tradução,
speak to you and
o nosso amigo, né,
our
da
friend
Vereda da
Marco
Felicidade,
from Vereda da
trouxe
Felicidade was
justamente
saying
exemplo
that
do que
there's an
você está
example
perguntando, né,
of what you are
porque
talking about,
vive
because
isso lá,
he
né?
lives this every day there.
Uma das empresas do
One of the
TIAA
companies in
tem uma
TIAA
fazenda
that has
em
a
cima
farm
do
on
feixe
top
dele,
of this,
né,
of
da Vereda
his
da Felicidade.
area, of his land.
E no entorno dessa
And
fazenda,
around this farm,
eles têm
they
outras fazendas
have
também,
other
né, em
farms
cima
as
das
well
áreas dessa comunidade.
that
Essa
are on
comunidade
top
tem
of the
direito
community.
constitucional sobre
They
essa
have the
área, porque eles que
constitutional right
preservaram
over
e
this
usam essa
land.
área,
They have
né?
preserved and
É
used
por
this
isso
land.
que
This is why
as empresas
the
colocam a reserva
companies
legal
put
deles lá, nessas áreas
their
preservadas, por
reserves,
exemplo. Ali
their
eles nem estão
forest
produzindo
reserves in
nada,
this area. They're not
né?
producing
Eles
anything.
desmataram toda a área da
They
fazenda deles e o Código
deforested the
Florestal
area
Brasileiro de
that they were
2012 permite que as
around
empresas,
that,
então,
and
é um código que
the
fomenta o desmatamento, né? Ele permite
companies
que as
can
empresas
take
retirem suas
over,
reservas legais de dentro da fazenda e
take
coloquem
away
numa
the
área
areas that they
descontínua
were
em relação à sua
preserving
fazenda,
in their
100
own land
quilômetros
and
adiante, por
displace it
exemplo,
into
né?
another land. So
Como é
this is
mesmo o
what they're
caso
doing.
que a gente está
They're
tratando
displacing
aqui para trazer um caso
the
concreto. Tem muitos
forest that was
outros,
supposed
eu
to be
vou
in their
trazer esse
land
caso
to this
concreto,
other area. I'm trying to
né?
give you a concrete
Porque
example
já foi levantado
because this
aqui,
was
né?
already
E a
talked
gente
about here,
tem
right?
várias reportagens
We
sobre
have a
esse
lot of
caso, então
news articles
ele
about this
está
case,
já
and so
registrado, não é
this has
algo que a gente
been
está falando
registered. We're
aqui
not saying anything
sem
that
referência de
that
achismo,
has
né?
no reference, that
Além
is
da gente
just
saber
from
que as
what we
comunidades
think.
relatam isso para a
So
gente.
in
Então essa
addition
área
to the fact that the communities are talking about this, right? So this
a
area,
TIAA colocou a reserva legal dessa
TIA
fazenda 100
colocou,
quilômetros à
put
frente da
his
fazenda ao leste,
reserve in this
né?
area,
Que é para onde os rios
and
vão e para onde a
this is
expansão da
where
Bahia, do agronegócio vai,
the
para o
rivers
oeste,
are.
para o leste, né?
And they're trying to expand from west to east. So this land was taken away from the communities. It was sold to these big companies, and now the communities can't access this land. And there are private securities who are circulating this area and not allowing the community to come back in. So this is an area that has vegetation, but no one can use it. The only reason this vegetation is still there is because these communities have preserved this area. This is important to talk about because otherwise it would have been completely destroyed. And because this expansion is happening from the west to the east, these areas of legal reservation are probably going to be destroyed in the future. And then their preserved area is going to be put more to the east because they need to keep expanding. So how do we open a lawsuit? Because this is very hard because they have various lobbying strategies within the state, particularly in Bahia. The federal police is involved. They've been trying to stop sort of these land grab strategies. But there were various high-level management of industries. It was a scandal, right? Because there's so many people involved from politics, mayors, etc. So it's very hard for these communities to register these, to get documents. When they go to the police to open a case, they are minimized. The investigations don't happen, particularly because militias are involved, like the local police is actually involved in these practices. So the traffic of influence and of these landowners, they are manipulating governments, and they have various ways of doing this. And so it's very hard, but this has been done before. It's just very slow, and it's much slower than the advance of agribusiness in the Idris. So Veredas da Felicidade has a process going on judicially so that they can gain land titling, but this doesn't keep on going. They have so many processes in the police, but these are not investigated. This is why our partner comes here and says this all the time, and he can say it very easily. This was a part of his land that was from his family, and he's used it for decades, as he told us. And today they can't even enter this land anymore. They were totally dispossessed of this, and this was very recent. Until very recently, they could enter this land. This is an example of a concrete example of something that's happening all over Matotiba. It's not just one or two companies, but the majority of them. Some are more violent, others less, and more covert.
Thank you, Fabio and Marco. We have a question from Kathleen, who asks, is it possible to avoid these harms by requesting divestment only with or after investment in the host communities?
Yeah, I think it's a good point because this goes together with our demand, our central demand, which is that these corporations return land to the communities and compensate for damages. So I think this is a good strategy. Thank you for the question.
We have only a few questions left, which is good because we only have about 10 minutes left in our time slot. The first one comes from Janelle, who says that they have a retirement fund in WEA Trust, which is from Wisconsin, as a retired social worker. Does WEA have connections to TIAA? Anybody care to address that question?
I would have to check. We need to check with our friend Devlin at Grain or somebody else. I don't recall that pension fund, although there are many actually that are involved in TIAA. Some you would be surprised about, but I don't recall that one. But we'd have to check with someone who's kind of an expert on that.
Doug, if someone were to look into the portfolio of WEA, would that show up as as some holdings in Nuveen, or it could be holdings in one of these subsidiary companies that that we get buried in when we start looking into TIA structure?
Yeah, I think it would be like two of the funds that it would be likely to be in was something called TCGA, I think. Or is that, I'm not sure if that's how it's abbreviated, but it is kind of hidden what it is. But that's owned by TIAA Nuveen, and it's a fund that pension funds can put money into.
Maria Luisa.
Yes, I think that is a good question because when we started doing research about this, we found out also that some public funds from Europe and Canada were participating in these farmland funds that TIAA set up. And because of pressure together with organizations in Europe, Aid Environment and FIAN and other groups, some of these funds are not part of the new TIAA funds. So pressure on public pension funds to divest from land and not have these partnerships with TIAA, I think it's a good strategy as well, and it's been working in some cases in Europe and Canada.
And the last question, which isn't really a question, is simply Martin says, greetings from FIAN International. Congratulations to the study. We will share with FIAN sections and the Global Network for the Right to Food and Nutrition. So we look forward to finishing up that report and sharing it with you all as soon as possible.
Just a reminder that you will get an email with the recording, but I encourage you to take a moment and to share the petition with individuals that are in your network that you believe would sign on. As Maria Lisa said, collective action is the best action. So we are putting up the action slide right now. The links have also been shared in the chat. But again, if you're a TIAA client, you can speak directly to TIAA. And if you're not, trust me, they get upset when you comment on their social media. They actually pay somebody to delete it. So grab a screenshot and send it our way because it will not be up there long, but they will hear it.
Well, thank you, everybody. This was a very informative, at least for me, and I have to say, disturbing as well in terms of what's happening on the ground in Brazil and the Cerrado. And I want to thank the audience and everybody for their insightful questions and for joining with us. And finally, once the report is available, we'll make that link available to you all as well. So thank you very much. And at this point, we'll all say farewell.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much for the interpretation, Juliana and Natalia.
Thank you, interpreters.
Thank you, interpreters.
Thank you, interpreters.